Overdevelopment in Southwest Florida. Agriculture. We have three expert speakers who will be introduced to you shortly, and I'd like to thank all of you for spending time with us today, as well as the speakers for sharing their expertise and being with us this morning. Before we start, a couple of housekeeping things. Most of you have probably already found them. There are bathrooms. If you exit this door and go to the left, you'll see the sign for the bathrooms. There's coffee in the lobby and snacks on the table. For those of you on Zoom, we ask that you stay on mute and put your questions in the chat. For those in person, please mute your phones and put your questions on the index cards, which actually are not index cards. You have little pieces of paper because I did not bring the index cards today. Following the presentation, we will have the time for questions. The League, for those of you who are not familiar, since 1920, has been a nonpartisan grassroots organization working to protect and expand voting rights and ensure that everyone is represented in our democracy. We empower voters and defend democracy through advocacy, education, and litigation at the local, state, and national levels. The League does not support or oppose any political party or any candidate. We are fully committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in principle and in practice, and we promote political responsibility through education to increase understanding of public policy issues and to engage citizens in the decisions that impact their lives. The League's position on environment, in brief, is that it promotes an environment beneficial to life through the protection and wise management of natural resources in the public interest. And natural resources are interrelated parts of life-supporting ecosystems. Protection, conservation, stewardship, and long-range planning are all parts of our position, and you can read more about that in the Impact on Issues document of the League of Women Voters US. We provide nonpartisan election resources to ensure every eligible voter can participate fully and confidently in our democracy. We hold educational events like today, and we are having another event in May on preparing for the 2026 elections, partnering and networking for voter engagement. And that information is on the back of your agenda. You can sign up that way. We will be having a Vote 411 voter guide and forums on issues and candidates. We will continue to promote voter registration, vote by mail, and voter engagement. This league acts on and all leagues act on select government issues and advocate on public policy positions that are developed through study and member agreement. In Lee County, our priorities are affordable housing, economic and social justice, quality public education for all, healthcare, and resiliency and sustainability. We're also promoting say no to mid-cycle redistricting, which still may happen. The legislature will be meeting in April to see what the status of redistricting is for the November election. And we are supporting single-member districts for the Board of County Commissioners, and all voters will have an opportunity to vote on that in the November election. The League, especially nationally and at the state level, is working hard and filing litigation to make it easier rather than harder for voters to participate in the elections. So with that, I would like to introduce Marcia Ellis, who is our second vice president, our environmental expert, and the coordinator of this meeting today, and she will be our moderator. Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. It's great to see everyone this morning. So I hope that after the meeting, you have a chance to talk to one another. We also have a few snacks and items that are available, as well as typically we have our literature over on the table. So please make use of the resources that we have. I'm excited also to let you know that there will be an opportunity for questions today, and there are pieces of paper and pens distributed distributed all around the tables because our experts that are speaking are eager to hear what's on your mind and engage with you. With that being said, I want to introduce our very first speaker. This is Amber Crooks. She is with the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. She specializes in wildlife and water policy as their senior environmental policy advisor. She represents the Conservancy with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Panther Recovery Task Force to minimize wildlife being hit on the roadways, and other committees, including their focus on the protection of black bears, burrowing owls. I see we have some burrowing owl advocates in the audience today, and the manatees, and we'll be hearing from Katrina Shadix more about that. You guys, let's give her a resounding round of applause and welcome her to the podium. Sure, thank you.
Should be good to go. Thank you, Marcia.
You're welcome.
I can breathe now safely. Thanks for having me today, even though I'm a little under the weather. I promise not to breathe too close to you. I appreciate the invite. And for those that don't necessarily know about the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, before I get going, I just want to tell you a little bit of who we are, since you may not be as familiar. We're housed in Naples, but we actually have a regional focus. It's a 5-county area, includes Lee, Collier, Charlotte, Hendry, and Glades. We're an environmental nonprofit organization over 60 years old. On site there in Naples, we have a wildlife hospital, just like Crow up here. So if there's an injured wildlife, you can take it there. We get about 4,000 animals, unfortunately, a year, but many of them are rehabbed and re-released back into nature. We also have on site our Nature Discovery Center, and part of what makes up the Conservancy and why we're so unique in the region is that not only do we have the wildlife rehab focus, the nature education focus, but we also have a team of scientists that are out there studying things like pythons, but also our policy advocates like myself, which call me a little bit biased, but I do think we are maybe the best department at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. And we do focus on policy issues that run the gamut from Everglades restoration, water quality, wildlife, transportation planning, local planning, and so much more. So that's a little bit of a nutshell of what the Conservancy of Southwest Florida is. And obviously, we will be very interested and focused on the issue of growth in our region. And as we all see when we drive around, we are faced with this existential crisis of loss of habitat and overgrowth right here in even Lee County as well. But first, I want to take you on a little journey to kind of understand what we have here in Southwest Florida that makes us so special. So I want to take you on a little journey into what we call the Amazon of North America. This is the Greater Western Everglades ecosystem. It's a 1.5 million acre watershed that we have right here in Southwest Florida. This unfettered nature that harbors wetland flowways, landscape level wildlife corridors, and biodiversity that run the gamut from the elusive ghost orchid to the charismatic Florida black bear and Florida panther. Now, can you imagine if you were lucky enough to get this shot? A mama and, the baby black bear and a panther in one shot? How lucky do you have to be? And this is just here in the Picayune Strand, not too far from where we sit today in Collier County. So obviously we have great biodiversity, but we also have some of the darkest skies east of the Mississippi. This shot was from Crew, actually, where you can still, at least when the shot was taken, see many stars by the naked eye. And also, of course, in the Big Cypress National Preserve is our dark sky certified area that we have here. In the Greater Western Everglades, We also have dozens and dozens of species, mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, plants, some rare, some common, but making this one of the most rich environments unlike other places on Earth. And oops, sorry. In an ever-repeating story, unfortunately, these natural, agricultural, and rural lands just outside of areas like the Fakahatchee Strand, Florida Panther National Wildlife Refuge, Corkscrew Swamp, and other crown jewel public lands we have are threatened by continuous intensification and land conversion, new roads, mines, and developments eating away at our Florida Wildlife Corridor, turning ranches and farms interspersed with a habitat that supports a multitude of that flora and fauna we just talked about, as well as those large mammal corridors, into yet another cul-de-sac. Now, without the wilds of Southwest Florida, we would lose so much of the unique species that we have here. I just picked out a couple favorites of mine. A lot of people don't know what we have right here in Southwest Florida. Like, for example, this sort of prehistoric looking large, what is that in the middle? It's a small-tooth sawfish. And a lot of people don't know we have those in our coastal waters here. But even more, people may not realize that they rely on places within the Caloosahatchee and Peace River estuaries to reproduce. And if we lose those areas, that is going to be a big threat to their ultimate survival and recovery as an endangered species. Over on the left-hand side, we have the Everglades mink. And I had a friend who was a field biologist looking for sign of this mink, only found it in the Fakahatchee Strand, nowhere else. So that is pretty terrifying when you think about it. It's just in that one spot in Southwest Florida. But perhaps over and above, one species that we're very focused on in the Conservancy that would be in peril if not for the wildlands that we have here in Southwest Florida specifically is our Florida panther. You'll see here in this map that the Florida panther used to range throughout the Southeast pretty extensively, all the way to Texas, the Carolinas, Arkansas. But as of today, the breeding population is really pretty much our Southwest Florida area in the red. That's just pretty much Hendry, Lee, and Collier counties is where there's 120 to 230 Florida panthers exist in the wild today. Now, each panther does have a very big habitat need. One male can roam perhaps 200 square miles to find everything it needs to satisfy its life cycle needs. But you can see very obviously that the Florida panther really needs Southwest Florida. And I would argue that Southwest Florida needs the panther, because there are many reasons why if we lose the panther, if we don't sustain enough of that green space to sustain an animal like the panther, that we are eating into the resources that we depend on as humans. I often think of this famous quote from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, where she's talking about the Everglades ecosystem and saying that it's a test, and if we pass a test, meaning we protect the Everglades, we get to keep the planet. I kind of put my own spin on it and said that if we protect the panther, then we might get to keep Southwest Florida and keep the things that we love about Southwest Florida, because they go hand in hand. Part of the rationale for that is the fact that the panther uses a variety of habitat types. A panther can use farmland. A panther can use wetlands. A panther can use uplands. It has a matrix of different habitat types that it relies on, including a lot of agricultural lands. But also, if you overlap the wetlands in our area and the panther habitat in our area, about 82% overlap is with wetlands. And if we're not familiar with how wetlands serve us, maybe it's a whole nother presentation, because wetlands are so important to us in terms of our water quality. They act as nature's kidneys, meaning when water flows through a wetland, it is capturing some of the sediment. It is also capturing some of the pollutants. Additionally, when there's a storm event like a hurricane or a big rain event, if we don't have sufficient area, whether it be maybe agricultural lands or wetlands for those storm waters to reside while the storm blows over and the water sort of percolate back into the ground, we don't want it to overflow into some of our built up environment, right? So wetlands can act as a storage area as well in those times of storms. So there are multiple reasons why we want to keep wetlands on the landscape where they are. That happens to coincide why panthers also are important, because 82% of the panther's habitat area happen to also be wetlands. So there's some dovetailing there. Additionally, agricultural lands. We can imagine we all like to eat, right? I know I do. So agricultural lands are another reason why protecting panther habitat also helps us, because many of the areas that are identified by biologists, by scientists, as important for panthers also are agricultural lands. These can be areas where we've got cattle. This can be area where we have row crops, tomatoes even, and panthers have even been known to den in tomato to row crop fields. So these areas are important, obviously, not just for panthers, but for all of us. When I was putting some of these slides together, I found out that about 1 in 4 jobs in Collier County, and I think the stats are similar for Lee County, are in the field of agriculture. So obviously economically important to us, but also important for this species. So when it comes to advocacy for the panther, we know the reasons why we want to keep this species on the landscape, not just for its own sake, but for all of our sakes. There's a couple of big policy issues that's on the Conservancy's radar. And it could be anything from, will there be an effort to prematurely downlist or delist this species from Endangered Species Act? If that happens, stay tuned. We'll let everybody know, but it is something that's been discussed. So things like, will ranchers welcome panthers on their land? You know, they can prey on some of their animals. How can we create that coexistence between people who are working the land and a natural predator? But one of the biggest issues that we want to talk about today is about habitat loss. Will those key remaining areas that the panther need be permitted awaited development? And if so, can we meet the recovery goals that we need to meet? Right now, there's 120 to 230 Florida panthers, but scientists say we need to have well over 700 to other populations. And it's not going to be just here in Southwest Florida. We're talking about using the corridor to connect populations all the way up, perhaps into other states. So we need corridors, and we need the population to increase. But over 700 is a pretty big goal, yet we still have to achieve. So some of the threats that are currently facing the panther, and all of this can be linked back to habitat loss in some fashion. Not every single point, but several of them. But the threats to panthers are innumerable. Not only do these cats have a low survival rate, only 1 in 3 kittens make it to adulthood, but they have all of these other threats. Human population growth, obviously, some of the prey loss that might be due to things like pythons. When the population is so low, the genetics can become backwards and make it very difficult for these animals to survive or reproduce. And of course, climate change can also pinch their habitat with sea level rise. Some of the things that you might not think about that are maybe a little bit more hidden or maybe newer in terms of threats to panthers be things like, unfortunately, illegal shooting of panthers. This is Uno, who lived at the Naples Zoo, if you're here on the right-hand side. He lived out the rest of his life at the zoo, very well loved and taken care of, but unfortunately ended up in the zoo because he was shot, and that's very illegal. So poor guy, but this happens apparently a lot more than we know. The other big threat that's a new thing for panthers is captured on the left-hand side here. It's a new disease or disorder that is affecting especially the young panthers, called feline leukomyopathy, where these panthers are having a difficult time walking. They're kind of losing the ability to get around. So it's actually unexplained by science what the cause is. If it's related to toxins in our environment is still yet to be seen. But for the first time in several generations for panthers, we're starting to see perhaps a decline, not a growth in the population. And of course, then this is the sort of omnipresent threat. Something that you probably hear about in the news is the amount of panthers being struck and killed by vehicles on our roadways. Every year, about 20 to 30 Florida panthers are struck and killed. And you can kind of see on this heat map, if you will, or these point maps here, some of the hot spots, things like State Road 29, for example. But even in Lee County, in some places that you might not think, Ben Hill Griffin Road, Tree Line Road, Corkscrew Road, State Road 82, they show up in some places that you might not think, that seem very urban even. And they have had panthers struck and killed on those roadways. So my advice is, no matter where you're at, to be just hyper vigilant when you're driving. I mean, there was a bear even spotted on 6 Mile Cypress not that long ago. So it pays to be very careful when you're driving, even when you feel like you're in an urban environment, because these animals are around. So not to bring you down too far with some threats, I got to lift you back up a little bit. We have had some successes over the last years to try to protect panthers. Things could be a lot worse than what they are now, even though we are facing some pretty big battles right now. Things definitely could be worse if not for the work of the Conservancy and many others. One of the things that we battled for about 12 years was a mega permit in Collier County that would have destroyed 45,000 acres of development. 45,000 acres been and turned into development and mining. And thankfully, with our efforts, we were able to stop that project. Something else that, and we just got a reaffirmation of it this week, so I'm feeling good, is our protection of wetlands. And again, remember how important wetlands are to Florida panthers and other species. We had a great success in the courts in 2024 when we fought to protect Florida's wetlands from development and permitting by the state of Florida. The court found in our favor then. Florida appealed. I said, no, they're not right. Well, we defended our victory, and just last week, the judges at the appeals court said, Conservancy, Earth Justice, and the other plaintiffs were correct. The judge was correct and found in our favor yet again. It feels good to win. Thank you. Feels really good. So who knows what's going to happen next with that case, but there have been some positive wins. But we are facing some pretty big threats still in terms of development, mines, and loss of habitat in Florida panther territory, even despite with some of those ups and downs. It's a bit of a roller coaster, right? So right now, I would say, and some of these projects have been permitted now, we have been focused on 6 and probably need to add a few more because more keep rolling in. Some really big projects in Southwest Florida. For a while, we were focused on 3 large projects in Lee and 3 large projects in Collier. Like I said, some of them have been now since permitted and are underway. But just from 6 projects only, you can see how massive these things are. When you talk about just 6 projects, over 700 acres of wetlands would be lost, over 8,000 acres of that most important panther habitat lost. If you don't care about those things, but you might care about your commute, 265,000 extra daily vehicle trips on our roadways generated from just 6 projects. That's from 80,000 people and 33,000 homes. So that's 6 projects generating that much change in our local environment. And again, that's just 6 projects. Since we made some of these maps and statistics, there's been a couple more projects that have also applied. So we really are now in this era where it's sort of not necessarily just death by 1,000 cuts. We're talking about lopping off limbs at this point in terms of this important habitat area, because So much of these, just these 6 projects are within the important area for panthers is pink on this map. And so you can see, wow, these projects are almost all pink. That's a bad sign. Some of these other projects maybe don't have as much pink, but they have a lot of this green, which is the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which we've all heard about how important that is for connectivity in linking for all sorts of species beyond panthers. So you can see, for example, the Troyer projects, all green, and the Kingston projects, all that whole area is also green. That's all Florida Wildlife Corridor that would be impacted potentially if these projects go forward, and some of them are already underway. A couple I wanted to just mention with the time that I have remaining, because the fight's not over. We still have some projects that have not been permitted that would be really devastating if they were permitted. So we'll get to that at the end as a sort of take action, if you will. But just to drive a little bit further in on some of the projects that we were just talking about, these were the Collier County projects that were all pink in that last map. And you can see why they're really important for panthers, because each one of these yellow dots is a panther telemetry point, meaning a point that the scientists have collected, a data point of that location of the panther. And it's very close to the panther refuge. This is a 26,000 acre public land parcel that butts up against the Big Cypress National Preserve. The panthers are using that land, and they're using this private land as well. They're using the corridor, and they're all around the Rural Lands West and Belmar projects, 2 big projects that we've been very concerned about in Collier County. Closer to here, we've been very concerned about the Kingston project as well. You can see in this map, again, the yellow dots are the panther telemetry, the panther locational data. You can see quite a few panthers on that parcel as well. And you get a sense of the scale also of some of these projects, thousands and thousands of acres, thousands and thousands of homes in one project. This project would be, or is adjacent to the Crooks Swamp Sanctuary and the Crew lands. So these were a couple of projects that we were hyper-focused on. And unfortunately, this project, Kingston, here in Lee County, this is what it looks like today, or at least a couple of weeks ago, when this drone footage was taken. They did get their permit. They did start to construct, meaning they did start to clear the land. It was a mix of agricultural lands and wetlands, and now it is looking very different. A panther is not going to be using that space, and when of course when the homes come up, it will avoid the area. So thankfully, though, the Audubon Society is challenging that project in court, and so who knows what's going to happen with that. That's usually the last step if you try every advocacy along the way to stop the project, educating the decision makers, bringing the science to them. Ultimately, if they make a bad decision, sometimes you do have to take that next step and take them to court. And thankfully, Audubon, as the neighbor to that project, is in court challenging Kingston currently today. Now, again, I don't want to leave you on too much of a downturn, because there have been some good advancements in panther conservation. The habitat loss continues to be one of the biggest challenges that we're facing. But I will say, wildlife crossings, we are on an uptrend with that. The agencies are now starting to put these in. Of course, we're going to keep our eyes peeled to make sure no new roads in green spaces to avoid that problem in the first place. But for existing roads where we already have a conflict and panthers are being struck and killed, we want them to rectify that by putting in crossings like this one here. So this panther is this FP260. He is using this crossing, and you can see the traffic still going through. He's using this underpass crossing to go from the Florida Panther National Wildlife Refuge over to the Big Cypress National Preserve. That's all part of his territory, but he wants to get there safely. And so he's using that crossing to go underneath the road as opposed to over it, and putting his life in danger if he was trying to just, play Frogger and go across the road. These are one of the best ways to provide that safe passage and hopefully eliminate or reduce those panthers being struck and killed by vehicles, which, as you learned earlier, is the number one documented cause of their mortality, 20 to 30 panthers each year. Some other positive things that we've been improving over the years is adding to the science. I was very proud to serve on this committee where we provided information that is being used by the agencies about where to place crossings, about where some of those high priority areas where panthers were being struck and killed by vehicles were. And then also in terms of outreach and coexistence. If we're able to get panthers into areas where they might not have been too many in the past, will the people that live there accept them? Will the ranchers accept them? Even for the people that live in our areas where the panthers are now, how can we perhaps reduce the amount that are being maybe illegally shot? Well, we've got a great program with the Conservancy of Southwest Florida to actually help pay ranchers when they experience a depredation by a panther, or if they're a hobby livestock owner, to be able to provide them a pen enclosure where their goats, their sheep, or whatever are kept safe from the panther. You wouldn't believe the number of conflicts that we have in certain places like Golden Gate Estates where they are picked off little bacon nuggets by these panthers. So whatever we can do to help provide that ability to coexist with their natural wildlife, we're going to try that. And I think Katrina might have more to add too on the bears, which is another thing that we're trying to promote coexistence by educating people about how to manage their attractants, and also with the Conservancy providing some compensation and assistance, some financial assistance for people who keep hobby livestock. Well, like I said, the habitat protection component is one of the greatest challenges that we have. It is something that we've been working very hard on for at least 20 years on some of these projects. Kingston, for example, was a project that maybe 15 years ago was looking to be a mine. And I'm very proud that we worked at that time and try to keep that mine from happening. But as you can see, they came back and they did get approval for a development. So it's a long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And so each one of these things that we have been trying to stay vigilant, stand guard for about 20 years on some of these projects. But unfortunately, now we are getting to the point where they're getting very close to having some of their permits. And one of those projects, that has not been permitted, that there is still a chance to stop, is that Belmar project you saw from a couple slides ago. It is about 1 mile away from the Florida Panther National Wildlife Refuge, which is perhaps the most important place for panthers. It's the most highly dense place for panthers, so we need to protect that space for them. There's not a good, it's not appropriate to have a development that close. So if you're feeling strongly about my message today, you want to help me stop Belmar while we still have a chance, and go on to the Conservancy's webpage, conservancy.org/takeaction, and add your name to the thousands already that have told the agencies, heck no on Belmar, and hopefully they'll listen to us. And if they don't listen to us, I think we may have to consider our options. But I hope that you've heard my message today and maybe lend us some support on Belmar. There's still a chance. And even though I've been having some ups and some downs, it's a bit of a roller coaster, some wins, some losses. I hope you'll understand that the plight of the panther is one that is for all of us. And let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Amber. And moving right along, I see many people are jotting down their questions as they come up. So please continue to do that so that when we convene our panel at the end, that we can get those questions answered. Now I want to take a moment. I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Katrina Shadix is the Executive Director of Bear Warriors United. She runs this nonprofit that's dedicated to defending Florida's wildlife and ensuring promoting peaceful coexistence between humans and nature. In 2025, a federal judge ruled in favor of Bear Warriors United in a lawsuit that found that the FDP had not been regulating nutrient pollution and violated the Endangered Species Act by destroying the seagrass, which in effect has starved the manatees. This ruling is considered a landmark victory for environmental protection, and Katrina is going to be giving you the details on these efforts to protect the manatee and efforts underway to also protect the bear. Guys, let's give Katrina a round of applause as she keys up.
Hey, can you hear me? Are you able to hear me, Marcia?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Okay. I'm going to try video. I wasn't able to get a lot of bandwidth. Hold on just a sec. Are you able to see?
For those, oh, there she is.
Okay. And not only me, my dog Gunner, are you able to see him?
Yes, we can see him.
So thanks for having me, and y'all are actually saving me from moving. I'm here in Jacksonville helping my son move from the Norfolk, Virginia Navy base to the Jacksonville Navy base. We've already got a load this morning, and I had to stop to do this, so he has to bring all the stuff up from the truck. So yeah, I'm getting out of that, and that's why I look like this. We're in moving mode for the next 2 days, and as a nervous mom, he does ship out on Tuesday. We just found out, so we're going to enjoy these next few days. But anyway, thank you for having me. I love talking about what Florida's wildlife and how we can protect their habitat and do lots of good things like Amber does. She's one of our colleagues in this statewide effort to save what's left of our wildlife. And I'll start by telling you how Bear Warriors got started, and then go into the 2 lawsuits that we have, and then take questions on those lawsuits or anything that you may have questions on. In 2015, y'all know we had a horrible trophy killing bear hunt that the FWC approved, and several hundred bears were killed in a matter of hours. They shut down the hunt, I think 5 days early, because so many bears were killed in such a short amount of time. A big percentage of those bears killed were lactating mothers, so that left a lot of orphaned cubs. We started an army of bear advocates that have been able to stop the bear hunt each consecutive year, 2016 through 2024, and that's a really big run. Last year, the FWC commissioners voted to have another bear hunt, and they took every bad thing from every other bear hunt in every other state and put it all together in the Florida bear hunt. So it's going to be worse than the 2015. They're going to allow dogs, baiting, groups of 10 people chasing bears with 6 dogs to all be chasing and killing 1 bear. And this is something that the FWC arrested 9 people for doing just a few short years ago. So to now be mandating something that is in fact animal cruelty and something that they were very proud to arrest and stop, it just, the hypocrisy doesn't seem to end, but we are fighting that. So how we got started was that 2015 hunt. A lot of us got together. We were able to stop the 2016 hunt. And from then I realized that the FWC wasn't just killing bears with a hunt, they were killing bears for going into our trash. So I started going around the state with different city and county commissions, asking them to pass bear trash ordinances, which would mandate the requirement to secure trash. And if you didn't secure trash, you get a warning and then a ticket. So I was at the Orange County Commissioners meeting in 2016, speaking to support a bear trash ordinance, and they ended up not passing it. But 2 people in attendance were the bear biologists for FWC, and they came up to me after the meeting and they said, "Hey, we know you hate us because of the hunt." At that point we were bitter enemies, And they said, but we want you to do a ride along with us so you can see exactly what happens when we have to respond to bear and trash complaints. And I said, okay, I'll do that. So a few days later, I went in the truck around Seminole County. And, I started thinking, I'm kind of the biggest mouth and the biggest thorn in the FWC side. Are they trying to get me in the woods so they can disappear me and, shut me up once and for all? And so I was a little, apprehensive, but I was going along for the ride. And the first house we went to was in Sanford, which is Seminole County. And that is kind of I want to say the epicenter, but that's the most people condensed with the biggest population of bears, which isn't big, it's just more bears than any other state. So when you have all of that loss of habitat and people moving in, that's where you get the most complaints about bears being in the trash, because unsecured trash, as we know, lures the bears out of those few remaining woods to eat very unhealthy food sources. Well, in the meantime, while this bear's in a trash can, a lot of people freak out or their dogs will chase the bears. So it creates a lot of conflicts. And the FWC that time was getting a lot of calls about that. So we come up to this one house, and there is, if y'all remember, raise your hand if you remember Sanford and Son, the sitcom from the 70s. So that house looked like Sanford and Son. They had a bunch of junk all around. The garage door was broken in the up position. There was an old refrigerator in the back, and there was at least 4 foot of trash stacked up in the garage, but that the bear had to crawl over before she got to the refrigerator. So the homeowner come out, and she was saying this mother bear brings her cub every night to her front yard. She makes the cub climb the tree, and then the mother bear proceeds to rummage through the garage to try to find stuff to eat. So the lady said that she wanted the FWC to kill the bear and the cub. And she goes, I'm worried about them eating my trash and eating from the garage. And I said, oh, you're worried about them eating your trash? I'm worried about the bears getting tetanus from all the junk you have out here. And the biologist kind of stepped in front of me and said, you're not supposed to say anything. You're just here to observe. But it was so crazy to me. Like, it just didn't compute that she was worried about a bear getting into her junk instead of knowing what she could do to peacefully coexist. Because here's the kicker. She lived backed up to the Black Bear Wilderness area. It is a designated spot where people from all over the state and Europe come in hopes of seeing a wild black bear. So to have that attitude, living in one of the, the best places on earth if you want to see bears, was just kind of very counterproductive. But this is what the FWC was dealing with for years. This is what they wanted me to see. We proceeded to stay at that woman's house for 2 hours. We secured her chicken coops with electric fencing and told her, what needed to be done. And, when she said, well, I want you to kill the bear, the biologist said, we're not going to do that. And then she said, I'm going to kill the bear. And then the biologist said, if you do that, that's illegal and we will arrest you. So instead, we're going to help you secure your trash. So like I said, we did that. And when we finished that night, we were sitting in the truck, and she said, if you and your friends really want to save bears, don't worry about the bear hunt. We're never doing that again. We learned our lesson. And if you really want to save bears, help us secure trash. So we started doing that. I'm like, sure, what do we need to do? She goes, well, we just need the volunteers. And I said, I'll get volunteers together. And she said, we'll provide the strap material. We've got 2 bears that we're supposed to kill next week. They were brother bears that were going into an elderly Lake County community, going into the trash. The residents were scared, not that the bears were going to attack them, but they were going to be scared, run from the bear, fall and break a hip. So I said, sure, let's do it. I called her in 2 days. I said, we have 60 people ready to go. And she goes, I have bad news. The FWC is not going to pay for the bear straps. And I'm like, well, that's horrible. And I said, let me get some money together. And I did my first GoFundMe, got about $2,000, bought all the strap material. we had our huge, very first event called, it was a bear fair. The FWC went, the news went, and we retrofit with these handmade straps every single trash can in the neighborhood. The residents loved it. The FWC did not have to kill those bears because within 2 weeks, the bears went somewhere else. Bears are very smart. They're not going to expend a lot of energy if they don't have to. So they went other places and stopped going in there. The HOA director sent a letter of thanks. And my friend who's an attorney was at the event that day, and she goes, Katrina, you have to start an organization and do this all over the state. And that's where we got our start. So I started Bear Warriors United as a nonprofit, and we have handmade 40,000 of those bear straps, and we have given them out to people across the state of Florida, and that has saved the government from buying expensive bear-proof trash cans and the people from buying bear-proof trash cans. And we've saved them over $4.2 million. And that's a really good, solution to a statewide problem. And it's a solution that is helping citizens. It's not using taxpayer money. So there are no downsides to this. But the best thing that we've saved are bear lives, countless bear lives. They have not been killed by the FWC for going into trash. They have not been killed by citizens who see a bear who think they need to shoot a bear. So it's a wonderful program. That's how we got our start. And since 2016, helping people secure their trash, we've learned along the way that habitat loss, the biggest threat to all Florida wildlife. So we started protecting not only bears, but all Florida wildlife because it's all connected. The bears are an umbrella species, and protecting bears and panthers also protect their habitat, which protect our lands that we grow food on and protect our waters that we drink from and protect our air. So if you don't love animals, you know you love clean water and healthy food. And we don't have that unless we have protections for our wildlife and protections for their habitat. So going forward, does anyone have any questions about the Bear Strap program or anything so far before I go into the lawsuits?
So Katrina, we're going to hold off on questions until
Okay.
the end. And if someone has a specific question to address to Katrina, you can put that on your card and then we can address it specifically to her at the end. Thank you.
So going into our lawsuits, like I said, last year, the FWC commissioners voted to have a bear hunt. Massive amounts of people opposed this on the streets. We had protests. We went to Tallahassee, had a peaceful demonstration, and we, Bear Warriors United, filed a lawsuit. We filed it in August. The hunt was to start in November. We realized we weren't going to be heard in court before the hunt started, so we filed a second a piece of legal, I call it a legal tool, a legal weapon, and that was an emergency injunction to stop the 2025 hunt until our main lawsuit could be heard this year. And the judge denied that. So sadly, we had a massacre this year, but Florida advocates, Bear Warriors United, Sierra Club, and thousands of advocates around the state all got together and bought applications. You had to pay $5 to submit an application to be put into the bear hunt lotto. So it was kind of like buying $5 lotto tickets. And there was a random drawing for 172 people to get the permission to kill bears. They would receive a bear tag. And so we had, over 100,000 people buy these, put in applications to hopefully win a bear killing tag, all in the, all to save a bear. Those of us that won, were not going to use the tag. So what happened when they did the drawing, I think I spent over $100 and got 500 lotto tickets. I didn't win one, but when the list came out of the winners of the bear killing permits, over 43 bear advocates had won a bear tag. So that was 43 bears already saved out of the 172. And then Bear Warriors decided to reach out to all of the hunters on the list. We were given, thanks Rhonda Roth of Sierra Club, gave me a list of all of the hunters, and this is public record. So I'm not getting her in trouble, but I appreciate her getting that for me so I didn't have to. So anyway, I contacted every single hunter who received a tag. I gave a beautiful introductory letter that I could forward to y'all because we want other states to use our playbook of how to save bears. So I introduced bear warriors and that we're very concerned about Florida's wildlife and the protection of their habitat. We're doing everything we can to conserve them because protecting bears protects Florida wildlands, Florida agriculture lands, Florida's waterways. And I also sent a contract and said, if you sign this contract and agree to it, we will pay you $2,000 to not kill a Florida black bear. And guess what? The end result was we saved 120 out of the 172 bears from being killed. That is a huge victory. It's never been done anywhere in the country. So we ended up paying up a little over $30,000 to hunters. And I would meet those hunters at the post office, watch them cut up their tag, which looks like a large green zip tie and had the number of the tag engraved on it with FWC. We would watch them cut it up, put it in the self-addressed stamped envelope to FWC and turn it in early. And boy, the FWC did not like that. The chairman of the FWC actually texted one of the hunters who worked with me on this and said, I wish you wouldn't have done that. And was just irate at this guy for taking $2,000 to not kill a Florida black bear. So the kicker about the FWC doing this, 5 out of 7 of the commissioners who made the decision, all of them made the decision to have the hunt, but 5 out of 7 of those commissioners are developers. And that kind of, shines a light on what's going on. These developer commissioners who are making unscientific findings on our wildlife and taking away protections, they are giving people the ability to kill the wildlife that brings protections to these lands. So the more they can wipe bears off the landscape, the more they can wipe gopher tortoises off the landscape, that land, that habitat, that ecosystem is not wildlife habitat. It's simply undeveloped land, and it makes it easier for developers to destroy it, like you've seen down in Collier County with Kingston, because they've annihilated everything on that land that protects that land. So we consider that a very huge victory, saving 120 out of 172 bears. And we're going to fight even harder this year with our lawsuit. We go to court in Tallahassee in August, and we invite everyone to that courtroom because we need to pack the courtroom to give that judge a message that Floridians love our Florida black bears and we love their habitat that all of us call home and that provides our quality of life. So I think that's everything for the bear lawsuit. And I'm going to move now to the manatee lawsuit, if that's all right. How much time do you want to, Marcia, can you tell me
Let's spend
about
about 5 minutes on the manatee lawsuit, if you can watch the clock, and then we're going to hear from John.
Okay, great. So the manatee lawsuit, a few years ago, I was at my attorney's house. She came running in the door and she says, manatees are starving to death. I'm like, what are you talking about? And the headline started, manatees are starving to death. Well, we happen to know a scientist that had been working on why the manatees are starving to death, not specifically why manatees are starving to death, but was working on that culprit since the 1990s. So we started a lawsuit. We hired him as our expert witness. And what we alleged and accused the Florida Department of Environmental Protection of doing is allowing overdevelopment to be permitted. And overdevelopment is, and this is how something for the manatees goes into development. This is how something about bears talks about development, and development is the biggest enemy of us and of our wildlife in the state of Florida right now. So we're going to boil it down to see how manatees dying had anything to do with overdevelopment. And we were able to prove that in court, that overdevelopment put more septic tanks along the Indian River Lagoon. As we know, septic tanks are made to leach things out into this drain field, which goes down to our soil, which goes to the aquifer. Well, a lot of these leaching phosphorus and nitrogen components were going out into the Indian River Lagoon. So that was one source of algal blooms. Another source was water treatment facilities having millions and millions of gallons of raw sewage spills into our waterways. So about 5 weeks before the manatee starvation crisis started being, talked about in the news and in newspapers, the Titusville water treatment facility spilled over 7 million gallons of raw sewage in a matter of hours into the northern Indian River Lagoon. Like I said, about 5 weeks, the headlines start, manatees are starving to death in the northern Indian River Lagoon. Well, it couldn't have been just that sewage spill, right? Well, no, this had been going on for a long time. So overdevelopment, all of the septic tank pollution from overdevelopment in the Brevard County area, and all of the overdevelopment that led to more stress and more sewage going into these water treatment centers, that caused the northern Indian River Lagoon to be polluted with human sewage waste. That caused algal blooms. Algal blooms blocked out the sunlight. The sunlight cannot get to the bottom of the Indian River Lagoon, which is where the seagrass is. And the seagrass is the manatee's main food source. So when you have that algal bloom killing the main food source, what happens next? Manatees starve to death. Thousands of manatees starve to death. We proved that in court. The judge ruled in our favor. The FDEP is guilty of violating the Endangered Species Act by permitting all of this overdevelopment that comes to their desk. So you have like the Collier County Commission, Lee County Commission that change zoning, and they send a permission slip or a permit application to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and say, hey, can you sign off on this so we can build this development? Well, instead of the FDEP saying, no, we're not going to sign off on this new development because it puts an additional strain on the municipal water treatment systems. It puts an additional strain on our water supply because you're adding more septic tanks. The FDEP rubber stamped every single development, and now they got, they got proven guilty in court of violating the Endangered Species Act by rubber stamping those overdevelopment permits. So when we won, that was great, that was awesome. But then the judge added an additional hurdle for us. And we're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? So he said, yeah, you proved the FDEP is guilty of overdevelopment. Now you're going to have to prove that they're going to continue to kill manatees, which in fact we did, because that year there was a record number of baby manatee deaths. And the manatees that had survived starvation were malnourished chronically for the rest of their lives and couldn't have healthy pregnancies. Therefore, a mass amount of baby manatees died.
So, Katrina,
yes.
what is the next step? Just to wrap up your portion here on when is the next opportunity legal step in this case? I understand it's under appeal.
Yes. So the state appealed our win, which we knew they would. We go to court for that on April 21st in Atlanta, the federal appellate court. And again, we need everyone to pack that courtroom. If you want to go on to bearwarriorsunited.com or bearwarriorsunited@gmail.com and email me, and I'll give you details to join us in court. I know some people here at the meeting today are going to be in Atlanta with us, and we appreciate everyone supporting us. And thanks for having me today, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, awesome. Let's give Katrina a round of applause for her more than valiant efforts.
Thank you.
Now I want to take just a moment. I want to introduce our third speaker, John Hallman from Defending Rural Florida. He comes from a long line of cattle ranchers that spans 7 generations with a rich family heritage rooted in cattle ranching. And John has shared with me that his family had a big ranch out in Hendry County where he was living out in his 20s. He's got extensive experience in legislative affairs in Tallahassee, navigating the complexities of state government and public policy. He worked as a lobbyist for over 20 years, and he brings strategic insights into the legislative process that's been instrumental in shaping the policies that address the needs for diverse communities. He has an uncanny ability to engage with both political and community leaders that respects his commitment to collaboration and fostering cooperation among different communities to advance initiatives. You guys, let's give John a welcome and have him join us.
Okay, well, thank you, Marcia. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Are you going to get your video on?
Oh, okay. I didn't see that. There we go. Is that, yeah, there I
There
am.
we go. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much.
So, well, thank you, Marcia. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters and Marcia for inviting me to take part in this panel. It's very important. As Marcia said, I'm the executive director of Defending Rural Florida, and we're a statewide grassroots organization that's focused on protecting our rural communities, farms, ranches, wildlife habitats, and environmental lands that are rapidly disappearing across our state. And what we do is that every legislative session, we will track bills as they're being filed, analyze these bills, and then we also send alerts out when these bills are being heard in committee or on the floor. And we use basically four priorities to either support or oppose legislation that deals with land use. And we ask four questions. Does the bill defend local control and public input? Does the bill protect agricultural land in rural communities? And does the bill promote responsible growth where growth developments need to be paid for and not wait till after the development to pay for them? Does the bill preserve our water resources and protect wildlife habitat? The problem that we're having right now is that unfortunately our urban areas have really been built out. There's not much room for developers to build more and more. And now they are turning to rural Florida as the new target for development. And we're seeing this done statewide, not so much on the local level. We see the state agencies and the state legislature really stepping in to try to facilitate more developments into our rural areas. The Florida Department of Commerce created the Office of Rural Initiatives that would steer growth into the 31 rural counties. These are counties that have a population under 75,000. There's 31 rural counties in Florida, including in South Florida, Glades, Hardee, Hendry, and Highlands. And these have been designated as rural areas of opportunity with a stated goal of achieving sustainable economic growth for these rural counties. And we know that economic growth means bringing in the bulldozers. And then we also have our larger counties, more populated counties that are seeing their rural areas that they have left, low density, like one house per 5 acres, one house per 10 acres, those are now being targeted. So we see places like Orange County and Seminole County, even Lee County, I know is experiencing this, that their rural areas are steadily under attack for development. And so, the consequences is we're losing our agricultural industry. In 2024, 74,000 acres of working ranches and farms were converted to residential. And, we cannot see this trend continue. Amber made some great points about the importance of our agricultural industry in Florida. Economically, agricultural industry supports $387 billion in sales revenue and nearly 2.5 million jobs. But not only economically, but our ranches and farms also provide environmental benefits. I'm very encouraged to see so many ranchers in Florida now, like you were saying, Marcia, that I, come from a ranching family, and they are really, many ranchers now are working with conservation groups to establish regenerative practices that are restoring wetlands and providing wildlife habitat. And this helps sequester carbon in both wetland soils and grasslands. So it becomes both an economic and environmental benefit. And we certainly need to keep our wetlands. Too many of our wetlands are being developed across Florida now. Developers are actually, using dredge and fill to take wetlands. And then they use, they'll say, well, we're using mitigation. And I could go in for hours on mitigation and the problems that causes. I mean, to me, our Florida wetlands, all of them should be preserved, not traded off like a commodity. And then we have, losing our cattle, our agriculture also is hurting our food security. So we need to be able to, feed ourselves. We can't depend on food supply chain issues, whether domestic or international. We need to be able to produce our own food. And we also know that people now more and more are wanting to buy locally grown food instead of having food shipped from California or wherever. It's fresher food, and they're able to see how the food is grown or how the cattle are grown. And so that's another important issue. So let's get to what the legislature has been doing. So people ask me, why are they filing all these, what they call preemption bills, that basically takes away local government's ability to manage growth. And this has been going on really for years. Really started in 2010 when Florida, in 1985, Florida had passed the Growth Management Act, which one of the biggest things was it required concurrency. That meant that before a development could be approved, they had to show that the infrastructure was being built first and being paid for. And in 2010, the legislature undid that and kind of weakened or made concurrency an option. So what happened is that opened the door to the let's build first, deal with the cost later. And now what's happening is these communities now, years later, are feeling the consequences, the flooding, the traffic, the strained infrastructure, and the rising cost. And so counties were, back then, for years, were just willing to go ahead and rubber stamp development. So there was, the developers weren't having a problem. The county commission, city councils were just going ahead and improving developments. But what's happened is that all of a sudden, local governments now, the last few years, and residents have started to push back. And each county, we see county commissioners being replaced with county commissioners willing to be more cautious on more development. And really, the public has really stepped up. I'm very encouraged to see all across Florida. I'm hearing about how residents are showing up to county commission meetings and letting their elected officials know just how they feel about overdevelopment. And that's been putting pressure on these county commissioners. Once they start hearing from that many people, they start going, uh-oh, and they have started becoming more attuned to what the community members, citizens want. And so this is sort of freaked out the developers. And so they have now started turning to the state, to the Florida legislature, to try to get, bills passed that will actually take away local government's ability and the public input. This has been going too much. And the goal is simple for legislation that the developers want. They want to weaken local control. They want to limit public input, fast track development, and shift the cost on to existing residents. So our position at Defending Rural Florida is that first of all, we believe there should be a 1-year moratorium on any new development and give each county a chance, should be required to conduct a full impact assessment. Where are they? Can they take on new development? So many counties now are just saying, we can't take on anymore the traffic, the infrastructure, the water. The Department of Environmental Protection has stated that a report has said that the aquifers in Florida are close to being dry, and we're losing our water rapidly. And now they said we're going to have to go to alternative water sources, which is wastewater to drinking water, desalinization plants, and it's just going to be, we can't keep losing our water. We can't keep paving over our wetlands. So those have been what we've been dealing with, every session here. And so that, and it's seems to be picking up. This year I was tracking 34 bills between the House and the Senate that would weaken local control over development. And so so the good news is in the 2026 session that just wrapped up, we along with some other great groups around the state were able to kill off most of the bills. Only a couple got in. And I'm not going to go through the bills, but there was 1 or 2 that we objected to. But they have plans to bring some more back that failed this year. So next year is going to be just as busy fighting these bills. But that's what we do. I would mention as I wrap up is that I have a really big concern with the data centers that are being proposed for Florida. They passed a bill that they said was going to protect local citizens from, because these data centers use so much water and use so much electricity that they were going to protect the local citizens that wouldn't be a drain, they wouldn't be charged, their electric bills wouldn't go up and water would be protected. But I can just tell you, and I won't go into detail right now to leave room for questions, but this bill that passed, do not think that it is protecting us. It's not protecting our water. It's not protecting our electrical grids. And I can go into more detail on that later, but here's the good news. I'll wrap up with the good news is this session, like I said, so many of the bad bills that would have taken away more local control died because everybody's speaking up across Florida. And so I just want to tell you that, and this goes with what, Amber and Marcia are doing, that voices matter. Your calls, your phone calls, your emails, you contacting your legislators, being vocal has made a difference. They are scrambling right now. They're trying to figure out how do we water these bills down to make it more acceptable to these people. So you are making an impact. And the thing is, we can't stop now. I had somebody ask me, like, well, now that the session's over, can we relax a little bit? And I went, nah, sorry. It's going to start all over again. In fact, we have, as Marcia mentioned, somebody mentioned, we have special sessions coming up. I've got to look out for there. They could try to bring up a bill during one of the special sessions. But the good news is we're winning. It's a lot of work. We got a big hill to climb, but it's worth climbing. And we are making progress. So thanks to everybody that are taking part, calling their representatives, and letting them know how you feel. So I'll finish with that and look for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you for all of your advocacy and getting us those timely alerts, letting us know how we can make our voices heard. And so I'm gonna lead with a question. Thank you, Carl. Carl got me a question before the event, and I see we have some folks walking around collecting questions. Please share those. So Carl was asking, what will the league do to stop the 700 house development in Alva? I think that was 1,000 houses actually on 700 acres, but it's a recurring concern. And so I will say that the League of Women Voters, as John was referring to just right now, when he talked about local government and local control of government. The commissions and having local government is the conduit that we have in order to be able to express ourselves. And the league holds a position, and that position is in our impacts on issues, and which you can access online if you don't have your own personal copy that you refer to. And the league believes that our rights to participate in local, state, and federal government at all level, should always be unabridged. Right? And so it's very difficult if we're going to be weighing in on land use issues to drive up to Tallahassee. I did it one time. And it is a very long drive. And so if we don't have local government, then we don't have a way to be able to engage on these issues. And I think this is where the issues of overdevelopment and some of the preemptions that have taken place at the state government, which John is sharing with us that they've been fighting back, really come into play. And Carl, I will say that though the league doesn't take positions on each individual development, I think that our policies and our positions on participation and not having our rights abridged is pretty well known. And I think that's something that we can all be very proud of because it's our work, right, along with the many, many organizations that really do help make sure that our rights as citizens aren't diminished. So great question, Carl. I'm going to go with another question. All right. Oh, this is a great question. This is open to any and all speakers, so we'll pitch this to, we're going to pitch this one first to Amber. Overdevelopment on sensitive lands is generally not for affordable housing. How do we balance the need for real affordable housing with the need to conserve our natural resources? Both are critical to our community's future. Thanks. Amber?
Okay. Yeah, good question. This is quintessential question. It's something that we do grapple with and have heard from the community for that need for affordable housing. So I think one of our biggest drivers as to when we're deciding whether or not we're opposing a project or trying to limit a project, it's location, location, location. So Conservancy's general tact is that we're not against all development. It's a matter of where it's proposed. And many of the projects that I focused on in our presentation are so far out. They are well beyond the urban boundary. They're out touching Big Cypress National Preserve. They are 20 miles from all of the urban centers. So they are very far. In some of the projects, they do try to lure getting approvals from, say, like the local commissioners by adding some aspect of affordable housing. But in some of our analyses of some of the projects I mentioned, the question of what is actually affordable was a big question. Like, okay, you're saying that's affordable. I don't know if I can afford that. And then also, when would that affordable housing come online? Sometimes it was like this little Easter egg, but like they're not planning to build that affordable component for 15, 20 years. So we will look at all of those details in terms of coming up with our position on specific projects, but it is a big push and pull in our area.
Right, and I'm just going to follow up because I recently was in on a commission meeting down in Collier, Amber, and I know that a new project that's proposed on the Collier-Hendry County line does have, I think, 350 affordable housing components in it out of, I'm not sure, maybe 1,600 homes. And so can you speak a little bit about about good planning policies in terms of compact contiguous growth and what this can mean for transportation whenever we have isolated pockets of people?
Okay, yeah, just generally, I know that that's also been a big issue, particularly with the Collier County example, this rural land stewardship area. If you've heard of it, it's just on the other side of Lehigh, this 20,000 acre area where there was an incentive to build way out because these new developments like Ave Maria, for example, the Corkscrew Villages, the town of Big Cypress, they were all sort of proposed as these big new towns where everybody would just live, work, and eat and live in this one town. And they were saying, we're never going to actually get in our cars, drive to where they actually work in Naples or in Fort Myers, and never actually leave to go to the beach or anywhere else out of their little cubby hole. And so we found that actually that there is a draw to try to obviously cluster the developments, but it does actually have to work in practice. And we found that in a lot of these cases, they were not dense enough to actually function as designed. So our general principle is to try to propose development where there is those existing transportation, existing infrastructure, and in some cases, like where the RLSA, it really didn't work quite as designed. Even though they were clustering development, it still wasn't providing the kind of services in return that they theorized.
Thank you. Thank you, Amber. So, John, I'm going to pitch that to you. There does seem to be some competing interest. And at the League, of course, we are very much in favor of supporting affordable housing in the community and fulfilling, fulfilling those needs, right? Like we know that we have an excess of rental units that are in the higher side of affordable housing, the 0 to 120%. We have 3,000 too many, but we're lacking 11,000 from 0 up to 80% annual median income. What are your thoughts about how that we can address these competing interests and still uphold our wildlands and our rural areas?
Well, yeah. So first of all, I'd like to say that the issue of affordable housing, which is a serious issue, I think should be handled locally by local governments. And here's another situation where the state has mandated through the Live Local Act passed in 2023, which basically took away local government's ability to decide how developments would come in. And they did that by enticing with the developers actually put this together, that they said, look, we're going to do 40%, 40% will be affordable housing. We're going to make this big development, but we're going to take a section and make affordable housing. And the sliding scale they use, what we're finding out is they're not affordable. We're still leaving so many people out. They can't afford. And so what this is a big tax break for developers, because they don't have to pay property taxes on their rental units. And what this is doing is it's just a way to get in to develop more and more of our land. So we're going to keep through that Live Local Act. And again, I think you're right. We need to address affordable housing. We need to do it. Each county is a little different, right? I mean, as to that issue, and that should be done locally and not through a state mandate. And I would also like to say that too, we still have to be aware of our water issue. And I keep preaching this, is that, just think of this, every new home that's built is going to consume 400 gallons of water every month or more. And so as we build more homes and more homes and more homes, we're going to lose our water. We may have to realize that there might be a limit, to how many homes we can build and have any kind of water. I mean, do we really want to have ocean water desalinized so that we can have drinking water? The idea of wastewater to drinking water doesn't sound very good to me either. So anyhow, I guess my bottom line, Marcia, is that let's let the local governments deal with that, with affordable housing issues.
I'm going to follow up really, really briefly with you on that. In terms of, I know that you're all about defending the rural lands and making sure that we have local voice in government. How is overdevelopment? How is it affecting existing homeowners? Besides just the water issues, like what kinds of impacts are happening that we might not be aware of? That because this is an issue you study, that you think we should be.
Right. So, I mean, what so many counties are facing now that realize they've overdeveloped is they're having flooding issues. When you pave over and we pave over our wetlands, the water has nowhere to go but into your home. So homes like in Central Florida, they're going like, we never had this 20 years. We had hurricanes, but we never had this massive flooding. That's because we don't have enough wetlands for the water to drain off into. And so that's a serious issue we're having with overdevelopment, is flooding issues, and which causes our flood insurance to go up. And then our electrical grids are being strained. And again, this is kind of back to concurrency. We started allowing development without knowing how the infrastructure was going to be paid for, and what was going to be needed for this more homes and more electricity and more water. And then we also see the other thing that so many people are complaining about in these urban cities is the traffic. Somebody says, well, it took me 10 minutes to get there. Now it takes me 30 minutes just to go down the road. And so traffic congestion, and that leads to a whole list of issues too, as well as emergency vehicles are not able to get to people quick enough to save their life because they're stuck in traffic. So there's so many issues with having too much development that, I could spend, too much time on that.
Thank you. And while you were speaking, we did get a question from the audience that asked, how can, please share, John, how to receive your alerts? I know that, those legislative alerts, that you're right on top of those, and how to sign up for your alerts, sign up for your Substack, and the kinds of resources that you are putting out in the community.
Yeah, so the best thing to do is go to our website, defendingruralflorida.org. You'll see some where you can sign up for our email alerts. And then you can go to the news section, which has all of my Substack articles. And if you sign up for the email alerts, you will get my Substack articles. I write articles on many issues of land use in Florida. But defendingruralflorida.org.
This is a question. I'm not sure who feels like they can jump into this one, but I think it's a good point because we know that we don't always have to reinvent the wheel, that there could be some good stuff out there that we need to be aware of. So this is for any speaker. What states do a good job in protecting endangered wildlife, water integrity, green space, et cetera, and what preservation measures are they taking that we could look towards?
Well, I was just going to say the ironic part somewhat is that other states always say they're looking to Florida as the prime example. So I guess we could always do better.
Certainly know that from the what we've heard today with the advocacy work from the Conservancy, from Earth Justice, other partners, Bear Warriors United, that they are certainly active when it comes down to the Endangered Species Act and wetlands protection. And for that, we are extremely, extremely grateful. So let's see, do we have anything coming from the, okay, where
Hey,
is it?
Marcia.
Okay, there we go. As a Lee County resident and Florida native, the overdevelopment of the state has become my biggest concern, but it's difficult to feel hopeful when rural land in my area is being cleared for a new community, car wash, storage facility, etc. every day. We're up against major developers and boards, ironically, that are not excluded from the effects of overdevelopment discussed today. This affects them too. How can residents contribute to actually make an impact? And so I think that, yeah, if we can hear one or two things that we could do from each of our speakers, that would be helpful. Katrina, are you still on board?
I am, yes. Do you want me to start off?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I think I know that the way people can participate and be effective is go to your city and county commission meetings. That's where all this rezoning takes place. This is where developers focus campaign donations on county commissions. And when they give them a lot of money, the county commissioners will usually vote in their favor. And to answer the previous question, I'm not against all development. Bear Warriors is not against all development, especially affordable housing. But sprawl development, new sprawl development is the opposite of affordable housing. The houses are expensive. We support and condone and want to work with anyone on this planet to redevelop existing areas that already have existing infrastructure. We drive by every single county I've driven by in this state has blighted, rundown areas. And I always say, wow, that could be turned into an affordable housing, apartment complex or duplexes. And they're not doing it right. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. So what we have found is that county commissioners use the affordable housing excuse to approve sprawl developments. And that just privatizes profits for development and socializes the costs on us because we have to pay for all of that new infrastructure instead of reusing existing infrastructure. And an example how you can be effective as a regular everyday citizen, I don't work, we volunteer our time. We go to the county commission meetings and we speak out against every rezone for sprawl development. Well, one was going to rezone hundreds of acres of ag land, historical ag land, and they were going to put sprawl development houses on it. We appealed their decision and they denied it. They were going forward. Then we filed a lawsuit with a local attorney against their decision. And what we did, we knew we might not win, but we did it anyway because their decision was wrong. But it gave us enough time to contact the state Florida Forever program and get the ball rolling on getting the state to buy that land, even though they had already approved a rezone and the builder was already in there. We stopped that clock long enough to get that land on the applied for and get it on the priority list. And I actually went, and here's a very, very important thing that you can do to make a difference. Go to the landowner. Go to that cattle rancher that is stressed for money, that is considering selling their land to a developer. Go to them and say, hey, we want to make you money. Will you take money by selling it to the state? Well, I went to the landowner and I actually wrote her a handwritten letter. And she took that letter and she gave it to the developer and said, you call that lady right now. And 9 months later, that land was purchased by the state of Florida and she got $30 million. And that ag land, that wildlife habitat is forever protected under the Florida Forever program. So those steps I would highly recommend. Go to your local county commissions, contact the owner, and get them on these land buying programs that Florida is famous for.
All right, thank you so much. You guys, let's give one more round of applause to all of our speakers for their participation today. And then Sandy, do you want to, Sandy has some concluding remarks. Thank you.
So my first is one more round of applause. Thank you so much. You've really given us a lot of concrete information and concrete things that we can do to make a difference. We are on a tight schedule today. I apologize for cutting off this, but we have our annual meeting immediately following this. So what we usually do at this time in the meeting is introduce our board. If those of you who are on the board and in the room, if you could just raise your hand. We are a volunteer organization and thank you all. We depend on the volunteer work of the board and members to make our organization work. So we all appreciate that. A reminder for everyone, prepare to vote, be prepared, be informed. And on the back of your agenda, there is a QR code and a link if you don't use QR codes to give you basic information on how to register to vote, about the League's website and some of our other resources. We're trying to make it easier for you to get information from the League. We'd also like feedback on what you need and what you're finding there. And I'd like to remind you our next meeting is May 2nd, back in this room, preparing for the 2026 election. And we will have a lot of information on updates on what's happening with the election. And I'm sure all of you know from reading the news, especially for married women, make sure you have your identification. You don't need it for this election, but you're going to need it for future elections, or if the national does something, you need to have a paper trail from your birth certificate to your current name so that you can register to vote and prove your citizenship. So stay informed, engage in decisions that impact your lives, and make your voices heard with elected officials and at the ballot box. Thank you all for coming today. For those of you who are members of the League, please stay, and we'll take a short break, just a quick turnaround if you need to go to the restroom. Those on Zoom, I'd like to remind you that there's a separate Zoom link. You should have received an email about 10:45 as well as last night. So if you have any, hopefully you'll be able to re-sign on. I have one question. Go ahead.
Cabinet put into law, and New Jersey, 20% of anything, any development made in New Jersey has to be affordable housing. And if we did this for the state, we'd have 20% affordable housing in any development.
Thank you for that information. So again, thank you all for coming. I hope to see you in the future. And if you'd like to join the League, we would be very happy to have you work with us as well. Thank you.